So we have a choice now that can be made. We can all benefit, all the people in the military-industrial complex, in the intelligence community, in universities and labs, in the United States and all over the world. We can benefit. We can just transform that industry so easily with just a decision based on our highest consciousness, on our spirituality, and on the fact that we have no choice unless we all want to die, and we don't. Not yet, anyway. So now we can all benefit financially, spiritually, socially, psychologically, and it's technologically and politically feasible to transform this game now, and everybody will benefit. In 1977, I was at a meeting in Fairchild Industries in a conference room called the War Room. And in that room were a lot of charts on the walls with enemies, identified enemies, names that people had never heard of, names like Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi. But we were talking then about terrorists, the potential terrorists. No one had ever talked about this before, but this was the next stage after the Russians against whom we were going to build space-based weapons, these terrorists. And I stood up in this meeting and I said, excuse me, why are we talking about these potential enemies against whom we're going to build space-based weapons if in fact we know that they are not the enemy at this time? And they continued the conversation about how they were going to antagonize these enemies, and that at some point there was going to be a war in the Gulf, a Gulf War. Now this is 1977. This is 1977. And they were talking about creating a war in the Gulf region when there was $25 billion in the space-based weapons program that yet had not been identified. It wasn't called the Strategic Defense Initiative, at least, until 1983. This weapons system then had obviously been going on for some time that I didn't know anything about. So I stood up in this meeting in 1977 and it said, I'd like to know why we're talking about space-based weapons against these enemies. I'd like to know more about this. Would somebody tell me what this is about? Nobody answered. They went on with this meeting as though I hadn't said anything. And suddenly I heard myself stand up in the room and say, if nobody can tell me why you were planning a war in the Gulf when there's a certain amount of money in a budget so that you can create the next set of weapon systems that will be the beginning of the sell to the public why we need space-based weapons. Consider this my resignation, and you will hear from me again. And nobody said a word, because they were planning a war in the Gulf, and it happened exactly as they planned it, on time. If anyone had any doubt at all about how far advanced the research and development program, the largest R&D program in recorded history, is today, these books are proof. This is the National Missile Defense Deployment Environmental Impact Statement, but it comes in 4 huge volumes, and they're being sent all over the country, maybe even to different parts of the world, to our allies. There were lists on the wall of identified enemies against whom we were going to build space-based weapons. They were also talking about the plans to create the Gulf War, and that's when the Gulf War was first being planned, back in 1977.
Who was at this meeting?
The room was filled with people in the revolving door game. There were people that I had seen once in a military uniform and other times in a gray suit and an industry outfit. These people play a revolving door game. They work as consultants, industry people, and or military and intelligence people. They work in the industries, and they revolve themselves through these doors and right into government positions. I stood up in this meeting and asked if I was hearing correctly that when there was $25 billion expended in the space-based weapons budget, the research and development budget, that there was going to be a war in the Gulf, stimulated, created, so that they could then sell the next phase of weapons to the public and the decision makers. That this war was going to be created so that they could dump the old weapons and create a whole new set of weapons. I had to resign from that position. I could no longer work in that industry. And in that room were the revolving door people. They were people whom I had seen in military uniforms, in their gray pinstripe business suits, the same people. I see them then getting jobs in the government. They're affiliated with the intelligence community and or universities. This is the military-industrial complex, and they are in revolving door jobs. In about 1990, I was sitting in my living room looking at now the money that had been spent on space-based weapons research and development programs. And I realized that it had come to that number, about $25 billion. And I said to my husband, I am now going to stop everything. I'm going to stop and sit and watch CNN television, and I'm going to wait for the war to happen. And my husband said, well, you've finally gone over the lid, you have flipped out. Friends said, you have really gone too far this time. There is not going to be a war in the Gulf. Nobody's talking about a war in the Gulf. And I said, there's going to be a war in the Gulf. I'm going to sit here and wait for the war in the Gulf. And it happened, right on schedule. As part of the war game in the Gulf, of course, we were told, we the public, that the United States was successfully shooting down Russian Scud missiles. And we were rationalizing new budgets based on that success. In fact, we found out later, after the budgets were approved for the next phase of weapons, that it was a lie. We did not have the technology. We did not have successful shoot-downs the way we were told. It was all a lie, just to get money, more money, put in the budgets to make more weapons. I was one of the first people to go independently to Russia when I heard that they had killer satellites. And when I went to Russia in the early 70s, I found out they didn't have killer satellites. It was a lie. And in fact, the Russian leaders and people wanted peace. They wanted to cooperate with the United States and the people of the world. Another time I called Saddam Hussein when he was lighting his oil fields on fire. And my husband was in the kitchen while I was making this phone call, and I got a call back from his first attaché, with Saddam Hussein nearby, I was told, saying, are you a reporter? Are you an agent? Why do you want to know? And I said, no, I'm just a citizen who helped to start the movement to prevent the weaponization of outer space, and I have found that a lot of the stories that I've been told about weapon systems and the enemies are not true. So I wanted to find out what Saddam Hussein wants, what would satisfy him to have him stop making these oil fields go on fire and stop antagonizing people. And he said, well, nobody's ever asked him that question, what he wants. So when I hear that there's a possible threat of extraterrestrials, and I look at the history of thousands of years of possible visitations, recorded history, and when I hear now the stories of the disclosures of honest military intelligence industry people who have had experiences with UFOs, with crashes and landings, with live or dead bodies of extraterrestrial beings, people from out in the universes. And if I'm ever told that these are enemies against whom we have to build space-based weapon systems, based on my own personal experience of having worked in the military-industrial complex on weapon systems and military strategy, I'm going to know it's a lie. It's a lie. And I'm not only not going to believe it, but I'm going to go out as loudly as I can and tell everyone to take a look. They have not taken us away yet. We're still here after thousands of years of visits. If in fact they're still visiting us now and people are working with ETs, live or dead, if they're taking photographs, if they're experiencing all kinds of UFO experiences, then we have to look at this as something that is not a hostile occurrence. It would be my guess, based on my own experience of having traveled to countries whom we've been told had hostile intentions against the United States, it would be my hope and my intention to do everything I could to work with people who are working to communicate with and cooperate with these extraterrestrial beings, because they're clearly not hostile. We're here. That's enough proof for me. I have a vision based on the new information that I'm learning about related to extraterrestrials and the information, the technology the techniques for communicating and sharing information, that we have the potential on this planet now of actually living in a state of peace based on the information, the technology, the direct applications of all of that to all the people of the world, to our environment and other animals, the plants, the air, sea, and land. I think that we can have a clean and healthy environment with a happy, peaceful, dancing, musical, artistic planet, with people who want to make money. They can still make money with their investments. There are enormous investment possibilities and technologies that can be developed. We're seeing tastes of it now, just in the fields of transportation, communication, healing techniques, life extension techniques. The potential is unlimited. The opportunities and benefits for careers, for jobs, the opportunities and benefits for health of our individual selves, of whole communities, of our planet itself. The potential for education, for being able to communicate from the technological ways to maybe telepathically. The communication and education techniques as an educator so excite me. We can be sharing our lives, our cultures, respecting our differences, learning about what each other wants, and most important of all, we can be touching our own essence, the essence of our own beings, the essence of extraterrestrial beings. We can reach that state of love on this planet. What could be more exciting than that? And those people who want to be leaders can. Those people who just want to sit in the light can. There is no limit to how people can choose to live on this planet. We have a chance to do that, and I think the window is closing rapidly. I don't think we have much time in which to make that decision. We're too close in too many ways to either dying our physical bodies, to having some horrible disaster happen, to having some sort of war take place, whether it's from a high technology or an exotic weapon system, or a bacterial or viral, or biological or chemical warfare, an atomic bomb. I mean, what are we talking about when we have the capability of communicating worldwide? I see that as a vision that's a reality. There's no question that we can have that right now, but it takes a leader. And from what I hear from talking with soldiers, industry people, university people, with the people around the world, is that it has to start with the United States president, and that's whom we all have to reach. If you're international, if you're around the world, if you're in the United States of America, whether you're from any party or any belief system or any religion, the United States Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States, is the person that needs to be reached. And we need to say that we want an ultimate, comprehensive, verifiable ban on all space-based weapons, including exotic weapons that we have yet to dream about. Wernher von Braun gave me the assignment of preventing the weaponization of outer space from happening. But what he said to me over and over again was that his real concern, his greatest concern, was about psychotronic weapons.
Did he discuss what those were?
No. He didn't discuss what they were, but he repeated over and over to me that this was the real concern. This is what we should really be concerned about. But he would add, the public, however, won't understand that yet. So let's just call for the ban on space-based weapons. That can be understood, it can be measured, it can be done. And once you have a ban on space-based weapons, you've put a lid on the arms race. People have become aware, they've become connected consciously, and they will begin to understand that there are alternatives. But his real concern, the biggest concern he had, was about the psychotronic weapons. Those are mind-controlled weapons, mind-controlled people or technology.